Okay, so let's continue on with slide number 14. So now let's talk about something called key. I mentioned this earlier. I mentioned that something, right? The song "Something." I played it in the key of C. A little bit more about that in a second, but let's define key here. So in Western music, the first pitch of the scale, right? Remember, the tonic is the home base to which music gravitates. So I remember when I played my C major scale, the first pitch is C, right? And so that's my tonic. And so all the other pitches in this scale, meaning gravitate around this C. Ultimately, they want to get back to C. So, and that's a C major scale, and that's one of the two main scale types. The other is called the minor scale. At least one of these are the, okay, so major and minor scales are the two scale types that we're going to be talking about in this chapter. The two main ones, although we're going to talk about one other one, the pentatonic scale, a little bit later. But okay, for the major and minor scale, we're going to talk more about these scales in the upcoming slides, but for now, a major scale and then a minor scale. So they're a little bit different. More about that shortly. But for now, just know that these two scale types function within this organizational system known as tonality, right? Remember tonality, we talked about this also in the last chapter. So review that if you're not sure what we're talking about here. So when you listen to a composition in the key of, say, C major, there are different keys. We can have like key of A major or D major or B flat major, and there's a bunch others. But we'll just stick with C major for now. So when you listen to a composition or a piece of music in the key of C major, you hear a piece built around the central tone C. So Something by the Beatles, I played it in the key of C, right? Because it's built, right? The song Something is built from the C major scale, right? When we look at the melody, the very first note is C, something in the way she moves, and then it goes on to different notes. The very first chord is also a C chord. Something in the way she moves. I played it on guitar earlier. The way to play, well, one way to play a C chord on guitar is this. So, right? And then I go through the piece. There's a bunch of other chords. But the first one, the home base, is C. Okay? So that's kind of the concept of key. All right, so now let's move on to slide number 15. Let's talk a little bit more about the major scale, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the minor scale after that. But for right now, let's get a little bit more specific with the major scale. Again, here's the C major scale. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or we had those syllables from earlier. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. And then you could also just say the letters C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay, so that's a major scale. That's a C major scale. So a major scale is created with a series of whole and half steps. Recall, earlier in this chapter, we talked about whole steps and half steps. So if you're not sure what those are, go back and review those. So let's play the C major scale and talk about it in terms of whole and half steps. So, okay, so I start on C, right? That's my tonic. It's my first note of the scale. Now, according to the formula here we see on slide number 15, I have to, in order to build this scale, I have to go a whole step, a whole step, a half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, and then a half step. And then that will be a major scale. It's a formula. So let's do it. So let's take a C note. Let's start with C, right? That's the first one. Now what's a whole step above C? It's D, right? I skip the black key here because if I went to here, that would be a half step. But I need a whole step according to the formula. Now I need another whole step, right? So I'm going to go from D to E, right? I skipped this black key because if I went there, that would have been a half step. Now, according to the formula, what do I need? I need a half step. So I'm going to go here, right? I went to the next white key. In this case, there's no black key in between E and F. So that counts as a half step. Now what do I need? I need another whole step. Okay, so I go to G. That's a whole step. There's a black key in between. And then now what's next? I need another whole step. Right? And then, so I went to A. That's a whole step. Now I go to another whole step. I'm going up to B. Right? There's a black key in between. And then finally, I'm at the end. I need a half step. Right? So I'm just going to go up to the very next white key, C. And this is another case where there's no black key in between. So that's my C major scale with that pattern of whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half steps. So you can start, so I started on C and I followed that formula and I came up, that's my major scale. Now I could start on any other key and follow that formula of whole and half steps and still get a major scale. I'll start on G this time, right here. So now here's my whole step, here's a whole step, and then I need a half step. So from B to C, right, there's no black key in between, and then I need a whole step, and then I need another whole step. Now I need another whole step. I need to go from E up to a black key, because if I went from where I'm at to the next white key, there's no black key in between, and that would be a half step, but I need a whole step here, so I go to the black key, and then finally I need a half step, so I go from black key to white key, and that's the end of the scale, right? Okay, so listen to Obla Di, Obla Da by the Beatles for an example of a song that is made from a major scale, right? It has a kind of upbeat, kind of cheerful, kind of happy kind of sound. And then we're going to compare that later to a tune built from a minor scale. All right, let's move on to our next slide. So let's talk about a little bit more about the major scale here. We're going to talk about one particular note of the major scale called the dominant. So how many different notes do I have in my major scale again? Right, I have 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And when I get to the last note, I can call that 1 again, because that's a C again, right? Or an octave above where I started. So I can call it 1 or 8, actually. So the dominant, though, is the 5th note of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right here. So the 5th note, the syllable sol, sometimes it's just so, S-O. I don't know who came up with that, but sometimes it's so, sometimes it's sol with an L at the end. So anyways, the 5th note of the scale, right, in this case it's a G, right, C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, represents active harmony, right? whereas the tonic represents the ultimate point of rest. Do you remember when I played something and we talked about the idea of consonance and dissonance? Remember that that kind of near the end of something, when we have this, let's see, we had these A minor chords, and then a D dominant 9, and then an F, and an E flat. And then right here, when I get to this G chord, that represents the dominant, actually. So we have we have a G note in here and a few others, because this, we don't want to end here, because that's sort of the ultimate point of tension or dissonance, and then we want to arrive at our consonants, right? So this ultimate point of dissonance is the dominant, right? I'm playing a chord. We'll talk more about this later. It's a chord built on the fifth note of the scale, the dominants, and it's a dominant chord. And we want to get to the tonic, right? The ultimate point of rest. So the dominant represents this active harmony, right? It wants to go to the tonic. There's a kind of pull, there's a tension, right? There's that dissonance. All right, so that's the dominant. Let's move on to the minor scale. So we talked about the major scale before. Now let's talk about the minor scale. We talked about the minor scale just a little bit ago, but now let's get more detailed with it. So the minor scale sounds pretty different from the major scale. So with the C major scale, what are my notes again in this scale? We have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. But with the minor scale, I change 3 of those notes, right? I go C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. So we get a different, right? That's minor, and this is major. Okay? So minor key pieces sound generally darker and kind of sadder than major key pieces, right? Listen to the first movement of Moonlight Sonata, about the first 5.5 minutes of the video I've attached to this slide. So watch and listen to the beginning of Moonlight Sonata, right, by Beethoven. It's a great example of a minor key piece. I think it's in C sharp minor. So check that out. But maybe before you do, let's talk about this pattern of whole and half steps for the minor scale, right? It has a different pattern than the major scale. So the minor scale pattern of whole and half steps goes whole, half, whole, half, whole. So let's do that with the C minor scale. So let's go, okay, first off, we'll start with our tonic, C. And then we'll do a whole step, right? So we go to D, that's a whole step. And then we need to go to E flat, right? So I'm gonna go to the next black key here. That's a half step. And then what's next? I need a whole step. So I'm going to skip the next white key and then go to the next white key, F, right? And then what do I need? I need a whole step. So I'm going to go to G. I skipped the black key, which would have been a half step. But now I need another half step. So that's why I'm going to go to the next black key, right? Which is A flat. And then now I need a whole step. So I'm going to skip the white key and go to the next black key. And then finally I end with a whole step. So I'm going to go from B flat, skip this white key here, which would be B, and go right up to C. And there's the end of my minor scale. Again, you can take this pattern of whole, half, whole, half, whole, and apply it to any other note on the keyboard, and you'll come up with a minor scale. So if I started on G, for example, right, then I would go, okay, whole step, and then half step, and then whole step, and then whole step, and then half step, and then a whole step, and then a whole step at the end. Okay, and that would be a G minor scale. Okay, rather than G major. Okay, so compare and contrast Obla di Obla da, which is in a major key, to Moonlight Sonata, which is in a minor key. See if you can really hear the difference in the feeling of those two pieces of music that's in part derived from the scales that they're built from. Okay.